Happy Thursday, Smite fans, and welcome in to the Smite Challenger Circuit. We're over in EU for a couple of the matchups, and then on to NA finally. And Gore, starting over in EU, it's been a competitive region all phase long, and I expect that to continue today.
I'm actually really excited to be able to see this. Elysium took a little while to get warmed up. I think that they're a team that like everybody kind of had their eyes on at the very beginning of the season. And I mean, I'll still say it, like, I don't think they're at their max potential. I think it's taken a little longer. And like, again, you know, for some of these guys, this is their version of relaxing, right? Like, adapting was like, man, I want to be able to live over where like I grew up. I want to be able to stay over there. So it makes sense that they're kind of, I want to say maybe chilling a little bit, but still a dominant force. And I'm really excited to see just the evolution of everything. Average Joe's has been a team I've been keeping my eye on. Lucky for me, I get to watch both of these teams today. And I think throughout the week, we're really going to get a good dose of, well, just SCC action.
Yeah, Average Joe's versus Tiburones, that's an important matchup later on there today, so keep your eyes there. But we start off with Clay Soldiers versus Elysium, and then move into Accounting Department versus Snake Hunters for our second EU matchup of the day. And as we kind of continue on, we're getting further down the stretch. The standings become ever so much more important. Elysium, everyone chasing them. But this is why I said it was so close. You look at all these teams, 2 through 5 really, just F6, yet to get a win yet. But every team, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th, all grouped up with one another, Gord. Yeah. It's those top 2 spots that everyone is chasing. It still feels like it's all up in the air, especially if you look at this first matchup. If Clay Soldiers somehow get a win, then there's an even further tie up there in the standings. Plenty of implications week in and week out. Yeah. It's not all said and done already.
It's a simultaneously important moment. Like, if Elysium get this win, they're starting to drive themselves so far away from the pack that it becomes not numerically impossible, but really damn difficult to catch up to them and try to take that first-place spot, let alone a second-place spot away from them. So if they get a win here today, you're looking at them pretty much not fully guaranteed, but almost guaranteed a top 2 spot. Yep. Whereas for Clay Soldiers, it's almost the opposite story, right? Like, if you start losing this one, if you're not able to maintain a win here, and these other teams that are tied up, like you said, 2nd through 5th, and they start climbing ahead, it's even more difficult. You have less weeks to try and knock that out. So being able to stay in contention for 2nd right now is really what has to be on Clay Soldiers' mind.
Gore, I'm realizing now we got the maroon crew going on today. You and I are on desk, and then the maroon shirts will jump ship on over to the cast. Something in the air here on this Thursday.
The last time we were the Maroon Crew, I'm pretty sure was a World's Finals? Maybe it was the semifinals, either way.
That's right, maybe for Paladins.
You know it's going to be good action.
That's right. It's going to be great. Look, let's dive into this first matchup, Clay Soldiers versus Elysium. 2 rosters, very recognizable. This Elysium team, you know, I think top to bottom, stacked and expected to win this one, but Clay Soldiers have made improvements. Score. This is a team campaigned by Agent Farrakrick, Saraga, Sibi. Farrakrick, I think, especially out of the mid lane, has surprised me so far this year. A big performance from him, and maybe this one gets a lot more contested.
Yeah, this has been a very fun team to watch as they go. Again, not always consistent with what we've been able to see, but they have been in control. I think this might have been last week, maybe, where they're bringing out things like Loki and being able to have a lot of flex picks. That's the thing that's really kind of caught my eye with a lot of the teams. Admittedly, in the SCC, maybe more so than the SBL, is the fact that they're willing to just bring out anything and everything. And I think for a lot of these teams, it's been able to work. I put a lot of pressure, like you said, on the Farrakrick. I think Saraga also has a lot of pressure here in the jungle to make things work. That kind of coupling as a mid-jungle duo is really going to, I want to argue, dictate the pace for this entire set. Whether or not we're going to get to see Elysium run off with a very early lead, or if Clay Soldiers are going to be able to kind of help hold them down, I think depends heavily on those 2 players.
Now, Gore, you look over towards Elysium, and the name that jumps out at you is adapting, right? I mean, that is no disrespect to anyone else on their team. You got Trixtank, you got Spudio, Angry, Terrem, all names that are recognizable. Has this team revolved around adapting in the way that you think it would, because, SPL jungler last year, maybe the most recognizable player on this team. Only so much can go into recognizability, right? But have you seen the adapting show at this team, or has it been kind of a full-on team effort?
A little bit of both. Sometimes it is just the adapting show, but not to the extent like that makes it seem. Like, sometimes he just has a good game, and it's exactly the same way it would be if any other team had a good game, right? The jungler and typically your carry or your mid is going to be able to get a lot of clout, but really there was a lot of support and solo work to make sure things got the way they did. But I think this is a team, especially because, when you think about it, like, adapting is the one who kind of stayed in the Pro League the longest. Trickstank there, secondary, a very talented and historied player.
Yep.
But I look at this roster, I see Angry, I see Spudio, I see Tarum, and I think all three of those, more often than not, have actually been the pillars for the team. They've had really consistent performances. Angry has been a guy that I've been backing as, like, if there's a mid laner, not even Drought, but, like, any team looking for a mid laner, maybe even to replace some of the ones that are in the Pro League now, I think Angry is, like, number one in my mind on that list. Of course, there comes the issues of, like, well, you're in Europe, and then there's visa issues, blah, 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 so maybe he falls, like, to number 2, number 3. Right. But I think as a player, he absolutely is someone that should be in the spotlight.
Agreed. Someone to keep your eyes on. Spudio, I think, as well, out of the ADC role, has had a great run so far here for Elysium. Picks and bans for game number 1 are going to be ever so important in setting the stage, and we will kick them off right here and right now. So, you start to get into a world where your Clay Soldiers here, I think, difficult to decide where you want to ban out if you're looking towards Elysium, right? Because I think for the points that you just made, and then a lot of what we've talked about into this matchup, I think it's hard to identify the most important targets. Maybe you just start going down the tier list. You realize it's not a worthwhile effort to try to take away every good god from every good player on Elysium. I think smart, though, for Elysium, this is something we've seen teams start to do against Ferrokrick, is take away that Giannis, because the potential of that pick has been high enough to sway the ebb and flow of the games that Ferrokrick is able to play on that Giannis.
Now, the thing that I think is really interesting is the flexibility of these teams makes it difficult to lock down certain bans, and we saw some highlights of the On-Her. I've been talking about him a lot. I think I did a whole segment on him last week in Waiting Room where it was just the fact that he's been one of the most picked, and I think right now is still technically the most picked in the Pro League for what he's been able to accomplish. A lot of good damage. One of those gods that's really easy to bring in but difficult to master. Of course, everybody that locks him in at this level tends to have him mastered. And so, of course, when I go into this spiel, they go for the guy that's literally right behind him in terms of carries, Heimdall, there for Elysium. I was actually thinking they'd be the ones of anybody to try and bring in the On-Her because of how potent he's been. But I really like the way this has been playing. You also have to give a lot of credence to the King Arthurs of the world because he's been picked up a ton and changing a lot of it. Same thing with the Wukongs. Like, Solo and Hunters right now seem to be the two real big priorities that are kind of butting heads for these top picks.
Right, it's like those two as a role, and then maybe the specific, like the Giannis, the Tiamat, or like the individual gods outside of those roles that might fall into priority category. But overall, Gore, I agree. I think that Solo and Hunter have kind of felt like what is getting prioritized pretty highly. Ymir here alongside Sun Wukong, so a lot of lockdown, great front line already secured in here for the Clay Soldiers. King Arthur, though, for Elysium feels pretty good there. You already got a couple great late game scaling picks here for this Elysium team, and then you add a set in, and things are looking maybe a little nervous here, Gore.
Whew, that's a scary lineup, man. Look, I love Ymir, I love Wukong, but you're going to need a really solid back three to win me back over if you're Clay Soldiers here. Heimdall, King Arthur, and Set. The minute rotations start out, once Set feels like he's online, I mean, it's not over for you, but it is going to be a very devastating team fight. A lot of damage in there, a lot of control in there. And so you're going to have to hope that Wukong, again, Oxform knockup, Tiger Stun, all going to be really good. Ymir freeze and wall, which, again, I can't understate this. The wall is the best part of the kit. The freeze is really good. His carpet's great. His ult's all right, but his wall, especially as you level it up because it lasts longer, is just a guaranteed block away from someone either forcing their leap, forcing them to use, I mean, sometimes, depending on how good your walls are, you might be able to force out a Phantom, things like that. And so I think, especially with a Kukul Khan, it is kind of pulling the rope back towards Clay Soldiers in this tug of war that is picks and bans, but again, these bottom two, they have to be able to compete specifically like with the Heimdall, with the set, to really help even things out, just in picks and bans.
Yeah, you get the idea that the Clay Soldiers might need a little bit of safety, Gordon. I think Jingwei is a good pick in providing some of that, being able to react in a split second to some of the engage that Elysium are bringing to the table is going to be important here. Kukulkan, look, with Sun Wukong, Ymir, you get a good wall, a good stun. Depending on what jungle that the Clay Soldiers go for, some more setup there. Teamfight could be over pretty quickly if the Clay Soldiers are able to volley those abilities together. But the Trix Tank Ganesh is not something that I tend to bet against here all that often, Gore. The setup and the space control that provides alongside another late-game scaling pick in the Baba Yaga. And this Elysium team, Gore, they seem content, even if the early game goes a little slow, because, I mean, what a roster they've got if this game goes late.
Yeah, it's weird because, especially with Erlong, like, I think Clay Soldiers, like, if you can get yourselves an early lead and really drive it home, win this game in 25 or less, you're pretty much set. You're going to be able to find it. But Elysium, if it hits 25, or I guess in the other version where they just get a very massive lead early on and get a lot of experience in gold, they will be a very devastating team. But I will throw this out there, and I had to talk Angry up earlier. Now I can bring him down a little bit. This Baba Yaga was locked in, what was it, like twice, either last week or 2 weeks ago, once against Elysium, where they just stomped it into the ground, and then Angry picked it up, and then immediately lost with it as like, I'll show you how to do this. Oh, whoops. And so I'm a little on the fence about the Baba Yaga right now. I think she's going to be fine. I just think it's going to take a little while for her to do well. But with Set, Ganesh, Arthur, Heimdall around, I think it's going to be a very, very fun game to watch her. Speaking of Heimdall, like, looking at Heimdall Jingwei, Dave, like, there should be no action in the duo lane. I think we will not see either of those hunters until late game. Both of them are just going to be relaxing. They're going to be way too safe, way too calm.
Well, Elysium, they might be the favorites going in here. Game number 1 starts right now.
Thank you, Dolson and Gore on the desk. It's Finch and Mifswag here for Elysium up against Clay Soldiers. And I expect this one to be a good one, but you heard their worries on the desk there, Miff. Is this composition from Elysium perhaps a bit too slow to deal with? An Erlong and a Cuckoo, that combo is going to be online right away. Ymir, good in the early. Do you have those same worries?
I would if we were evaluating the compositions on their own, but Finch, I am now confident enough to make just calculations based on the teams, and Clay Soldiers and Saragazek in particular is a player that we do not see get involved throughout the early game. I'm expecting this Erlong Shen to hit stride around level 6 or 7, and I think adapting should be able to keep pace with that pretty easily. I think it comes down to, especially the European SCC, whether or not a team is capable of team fighting as 5. It seems like the majority of these games are won and lost at that 20-so-on minute mark. And I'm not going to bet against Elysium almost ever, but evaluating compositions exclusively, I'd say that it should be a pretty decent match.
Well, that has been the rhythm here in the EU SCC. As you said, that it's slow. Nice Bifrost just there by Spudio. We see this from Heimdalls. Well, they'll head out, place one out there early in lane, and that allows them to quickly move from purple in the lane. Oftentimes we'll see supporters rush over here first, though, hit that level 2 quickly, but just not the strat anymore. Both teams still level 1 after the first wave cleared. But as they settle on the desk, probably not going to see a ton of action over there once these supports leave. Maybe while they're still there, we might see Agent and Trixtank try and set something up, but I think likely both this Heimdall and this Jingwei would like to kind of put their heads down, farm up a little bit, then come out later on with a bunch of crit and say, hey, I've got all this crit. Hope you like that. And no one will.
Yeah, the battle of the double passive hunters, no on her locked in, means that there's no agency between these two roles instead. Gotta wait on some ganks or some support rotations in. We'll skirmish around this mid-camp. Has Agent pushing out the order side team in exchange for about 50% of his HP bar.
Nice lockdown, though, from Trix, but Agent makes it out of there nice and easy. No more trouble in this long lane. Likely if Agent plays things safe. He doesn't have a safety relic, though. It's Blink. So there could still be some trouble for him as Trixtank picked up beads. It's 5 sets of beads for Elysium across the board. And talk a bit more about how these teams have started out as Trixtank now switches targets to Caspanify, who is elusive. Not going to be any Bumba's Hammers in this one. It's Eye of the Jungle for both of these junglers. I don't think that's too much of a surprise for these characters who can be a bit more auto-attack focused. Is that really all there is to that decision-making process, though, in the jungle? Do you want that extra attack speed? Is it about battling in the jungle then with that protector of the jungle eventually, or Is Bumba's hammer now with those changes just not good enough where you always want it?
Some gods are still going to benefit pretty greatly from Bumba's hammers. I don't think it's going to be as ubiquitous as it once was, but
And it was ubiquitous.
Eye of the Jungle, or Protection of the Jungle rather, just having percentage anything, be it defense or power, going to be pretty good, even if it is only inside the jungle itself. I think that auto attack junglers should be able to benefit a little bit more so from Protection of the Jungle, as you already highlighted as well. Both gods here going to be a little bit more late game slanted, it seems like, with the builds that we're seeing come through. I wouldn't be surprised if both junglers go for Stone Cutting Sword, immediately into Ninja Tabai, and then potentially we see a Shifter Shield pickup or something along those lines.
Damage onto Agent, and the Gjallarhorn almost enough. Agent puts up the wall. Remember, there was no shell or the like to help buy man out, not even a set of beads to get away from the slow. Doesn't matter though, Agent able to find his back safely. And then becomes this other new discussion. I've seen some of our SPL pros talking a little bit about how strong reinforced Greaves are. That next backup wasn't there in that interaction, obviously, but that'll likely be where both of these supports go. But then I also heard Mike, I think he started up I don't know what it's called on Twitter, a story or whatever, where he talked a little bit about how good and how critical they are for these supports to have reinforced Greaves, or they'll likely just die. And any thoughts on this item and its strength? I feel like these supports do kind of need it with where they are here in Season 8.
Look, supports get the short end of the stick, Finch. Reinforced Greaves probably invented for solo laners. Supports finally find an item that makes them relevant in the early game. And then I think that means that it's kind of busted, so I'm going to start calling for nerfs on Twitter almost all the time for it. Look, I'm just a little bit upset that as a jungler slash ADC player, I'm not allowed to build those boots. They're not really core for me, which means that everyone else is getting to benefit from something that I can't have, and that is unacceptable in my eyes. But realistically, it is just that survivability and the just slightly expedited power spike that Reinforced Greaves affords somebody that makes it so valuable.
Yeah, come on, let our supports have something. I gotta think, man. You know, we gotta find a way to get it in there for these more divey junglers, right? That need that survivability.
Oh
maybe.
yeah.
Who knows? Maybe if you can get out there and iterate a little bit on it. We'll see what you come back with in terms of the data. Everyone else, though, looking pretty standard. It is this eventual pendulum of ages start for both of these mid laners here with this Sands of Time. I don't think that's surprising anyone. The Gilded Arrow Hunter build likely not going to see any changes for a while, unless that eventual Wind Demon Deathbringer stops looking so good, and I don't think it is going to for the next little while. So no big surprise on where they go. But look at these solo laners. I think no big surprise. Terram does go for those templates we already covered, but Sibi going with his Bluestone Warrior Tabai start. He is going to be a bit squishier over there. And once King Arthur gets this item, eventually Stone of Gaia, it doesn't feel like you can't talk to him at all over there in solo.
Yeah, you gotta gank him right now, preferably before right now when he's got the Reinforced Greaves. But if Saragazek wants to get involved in solo lane, that window is slowly starting to slip away, whereas Sibi, electing to pick up Warrior's Tabai for himself, has effectively extended that window. Generally, Sun Wukong, pretty safe. CC immunity the ultimate, turn into a bird, as well as healing for yourself, so you're not too concerned about survivability. But just look at this, man. I don't care how much extra power you have, you kind of take more damage than I do.
Yeah, and he's good at giving out the damage. Saragazek caught on top of the Dharmic Pillars. Great engage from Trickstank, and the final damage comes from Adapting, who finds first blood from Elysium. And listen, if you're out there, if you're a young Saragazek thinking, you know, you might be able to make something happen with this Blink start, Trickstank going to do a whole lot of that to you then.
Hey, look, we called it earlier on. We said Saragazek likes to get involved at level 6. Didn't think it was going to be a death, but it was. First blood for Elysium, and they're not quite done.
No, Farrakrick looking mighty tasty as well, but beads come out from him, buy him some much-needed time, and he shall escape. But I don't know if he'll be able to pull that off a second time with those beads down. I think Trickstank going to be doing plenty more hunting.
Yeah, that Dharmic Pillars is just such a great lockdown tool, especially against Saragazek. I mean, we saw Erlang Shen. Dude doesn't have a leap, just has to walk through it or walk around it, and both options look pretty bad when you're staring down the barrel of a 4-man Order Squad stack-up. But that doesn't mean that the Clay Soldiers are completely out of it just yet, because both the jungler and support do elect to pick up more aggressive relics. Blink for both Saraga and Agent means that both Saraga and Agent should be able to set up for Farrakrick with that Spirit of the Nine Winds, which could immediately turn around a fight.
Elysium, though, grouping up for a blue buff Invade. Only 2 members here in right, and they already know Sibi doesn't want to step into this with this build path he's on. Looks like he'll be getting a bit tankier shortly, though. likely going to be that shifters that's been so popular lately. They invade the blue buff successfully, no contest, and they'll take themselves a greater Scorpion on the right side. And this is what Elysium do. It's not always flashy, but they're just applying pressure everywhere, in mid and in right, on those buffs, on those camps. It's making life real hard for Clay Soldiers, who I thought were going to be the aggressors through this early game. We thought maybe Elysium would slow down and wait, but it's been them kind of stepping on the gas so far.
It has, and it looks like they're about to spring a trap in mid. Keep your eyes on Trix. Was positioning a little bit further up, thinks better of it in the 3 versus 2 and backs up. I want to see Elysium go ahead and just spin their wheels for a little bit. They can rest on their laurels at this point because they have such strong scaling into the late game. King Arthur, Set, even Angry on this Baba Yaga, all going to have phenomenal late games. Should be able to outscale in the 5v5, but with the gold lead that they're already afforded, I can't slight Elysium if they do decide to go ahead and group up on a Gold Fury or even the Pyromancer once that one spawns up. But having Elysium clear out both sides' greater Scorpions means that it creates the opportunity for Clay Soldiers to take the path of least resistance and group up wherever Elysium isn't. If we see the Order side team on Pyro, expect to see Clay Soldiers on the opposite side on Gold, or more likely, we see Elysium on Gold and Clay Soldiers on Pyro.
I think that is likely, as now they're warding for more buff invades, adapting, placing down the ward to gain the information on when a camp is there for them to take, and I do mean take, as that likely would be their plan, though Trixtank caught out, and a tough spot uses that dash too early, and now can't use it to get through the walls, but so far still comfortable, drops the Dharmic Pillars, even commits the beads, whatever it takes to keep himself alive, but they commit the Spirit of the Nine Winds over the wall, and Trixtank does finally perish as he is sent to the afterlife, but Tarum now in great position to find some punish. Agent's already gone down, Sibby forced to use that Somersault Cloud, so it will be support for support. Trixtank dropped everything he had in the tank and still could not survive.
Yeah, 4 ultimates will do that to you, right? Agent, Ferricrick, Sergazek, and Sibby use their ultimates in that exchange. 3 of them targeted towards Trixtank before he eventually falls down. But that was a nice small win for Clay Soldiers. Support for support trade, but the kill lands onto Ferricrick in mid, who is already kind of suffering from about a 2-level, level and a half deficit now, able to catch up slightly up to level 10, so I think that's going to be a good start for the Clay Soldiers to get some levels onto their mid laner and potentially some more one-shot potential. If he's there a little bit sooner, maybe it doesn't take all 4 ultimates and just his next time.
Trixtank does well to at least draw those resources out. His bead's now down for a little while longer, but Dharmic Pillars almost back to him already, so not as though he committed really all that much in the end. I wouldn't say, as Clay Soldiers should be having their resources back soon as well. Those ultimates back up there, in particular, available with his Sands of Time cooldown boots, and they go right back to Trix. But Trix locks down Agent in response. How does that turn into an engage for Elysium? But good response from Ferricrick on the back of a stun from Agent, and Trixtank falls twice in quick succession without those beads. And listen, if they're going to commit all of that to take care of Trixtank the first time around, then I think they do have to do exactly that and come find him again. Can this turn into a Gold Fury for the Clay Soldiers, who grab that Oracle Vision? They are nearby, but I don't think they want to hard commit to this point. They'll just take their pick and leave.
Gotta highlight that micro play from Agent there. Just walks down Trixtank. Trix holds onto his dash, realizing that he needs to have it up in order to get past the wall. So Agent kind of bluffs it out, blinks forward, and then on sound response, Trixtank uses his own dash. Unfortunately, though, Agent blinks in front of him, so dashes into him. That's phenomenal Ymir play to secure a kill for his team.
Looks like they want to turn that kill into the Pyromancer. Tarum on his way to try and contest. Agent stunned down, takes a ton of poke from Angry's Baba Yaga over the wall. Clay Soldiers do secure Pyro. Sibby sticks to it alone. So a nice objective going their way, but they are forced to run on the backside. Elysium were the initial aggressors, but this Clay Soldiers pressure onto Trixtank, these 2 picks, and making sure his relics are down, that's really helped them find a little bit of a way back in, slowly trying to close up this gold gap.
Yeah, and it is slow, by the way. This is a 2-2 match. First Blood, really the only large objective separating these 2 teams. Pyromancer picked up by Clay Soldiers as the first neutral to go down so far this game, and we're still looking at about 1,000 gold in favor of the Order side squad, who is just farming up incredibly efficiently. I mean, if you want any indicator on how far apart these 2 squads are in terms of just coming online inside of the builds, we're already looking at a tower shield for adapting, almost an entire item up on Sergazek, and also a level as well. Adapting has been power farming the jungle and still finding the time to rotate in and get involved in these fights.
It's been good from them so far. But as you said, still not much separating these two teams, but lead there for Elysium True. The experience gap nice as well, but certainly not out of reach for the Clay Soldiers. They can get a little bit to go their way, adapting way on enemy side of the map in enemy territory, but regroup safely, no one there to punish him for that either. And so we make our way back towards everyone where they belong, so perhaps maybe a bit more of a build roundup, as it looks like Veracryk wants some safety. Likely going to be a Breastplate of Valor, I'd imagine. That puts him right at that CDR cap. When do you like these mid-mages to go for that defensive option there in the middle lane as Sibi takes a little bit of damage here from Terror?
Well, I think that it's almost core on Kukulkan, just because of
Sure.
that mana synergy with his passive,
It's
going to
power
build him up
for him
some
too,
additional power. So he can afford to go for it. Normally we won't see standard mages that don't benefit from just the mana stack, go for that more defensive build, but normally defense is going to be stronger when you are ahead, so you can leverage that aggressive playstyle. We might see Veracryk try and match the dive of the rest of his team, try and keep up with Saragazek and Sibi inside of these fights, but for now, I think it is generally just because he is on that Kukulkan as Spudio forced to use the beads.
Wow. That is the strength of Amir. You just kind of have to use beads there, or you're done. But Spudio's still getting aggressive. Angry has his relics, both of them forced out by Saraga. Great work across the map from Clay Soldiers to really make this backline of Elysium vulnerable. If they could regroup and find a way to engage this fight, it should be a pretty good win for the Clay Soldiers. But it's Elysium in the aggressive positioning. It's Elysium who are ready to start up this Gold Fury despite the great work Clay Soldiers did. But now they have to find their moment to move in. The Fury down to half HP. Veracryk and Agent looking for an engage, but adapting keeps them at bay. Tarum there as well. And the Fury goes down without much contest, or at the very least it's low. Agent moves in, but they cannot contest. Elysium grab the objective, and Agent's life as well. In comes the Kukulkan ultimate, but that finds very little. In fact, Elysium looking to re-engage. They've decided Saraga is the target. He looks for some damage on the tricks. It's not enough there. And in comes Kaspainify, who at very least gets the enemy support.
Saragazek falls down to adapting, and now we're looking at a split-up fight. Collapsing onto the three members of Elysium, and Veracryk left high and dry.
Yeah, in an awful position, but Tarum right on top of him. Feels so hard as a cuckoo to get this King Arthur off him. No way it can happen. They even get another kill onto Kaspainify as well. Sibi drops, and I don't know how, with the backline getting all their relics forced as the fight goes so sideways for Clay Soldiers.
Clay Soldiers, the deck was stacked against them from the beginning. Sibi was roughly 30 seconds late to the rotation, does not make his way into the team fight until Gold Fury had already fallen, whereas Terrorem was running amok inside of Clay Soldiers' backline before the Gold Fury was even pulled. From there, Elysium re-engaged the fight onto Saragazek on the left-hand side, and the entirety of Clay Soldiers get baited into a poor engagement from behind, trying to peel out for their jungler, and just puts them so far out of position. Clay Soldiers 5 dead, desynced as Agent was able to respawn before the last member of Clay Soldiers does fall, in exchange for one member of Elysium. By the way, Elysium also pick up Gold Fury. Massive swing for the Order side team, kind of rounding out at about a 5,000 gold lead.
A pretty big play there for Elysium dominating that left side of the map, and you saw the relic pickup for Clay Soldiers. It's double shell for their backline in place of Aegis. We see that all the time up against these attack speed assassins, yes, but is that going to be enough to keep himself safe from Angry when he's there? Is Tarum really going to care much about that at all when he gets in close? It's mainly to stop adapting, and it doesn't seem to have even done that. My man's 3-0-4, looking cozy on this set here at this point in the game. Maybe not cozy now that he's been caught out, locked down, and has no beads. Does use the Aegis, yes, and it buys him some time. And now Tarum comes in to provide the support in this fight. Suddenly looks a whole lot worse. Tarum gets the first kill, and Sibi can only watch from on high. And where's the safe spot to land? There isn't one. Trickstang there. The silence as well, and Adapting finds his fourth. Can't believe they thought they had him locked down in the jungle.
Yeah, meanwhile on the left-hand side, Spudio gets the better end of a 1v1 up against Kaspainify, forces him back to base, and takes out a tier 1 tower. Pyromancer now being looked at by the Order side team, and looked at's probably not the right word, picked up maybe a little bit better as Tarum going deep, and okay, Angry gets the kill. Veracryk, rest in peace.
Yeah, I can't believe Veracryk thought he was safe back by his speed buff. You not understand how the state of the game has changed, obviously a bit glib, as Tarum is on a warpath at this point. All things are within his reach, all within his grasp, as he has become the nightmare of this map for the Clay Soldiers. They don't have even the beginnings of an answer. I don't even know if they know the right question at this point yet to how to deal with Tarum and then to come up with a proper answer at this point. My man is a wrecking ball, and the rest of Elysium happy to follow up on the back of his engagements. I don't know, man. Is there an answer for Clay Soldiers to tear him? Is it run? Is it be wherever he isn't at this point? Because he's tough to stop.
It feels like you're just praying that Caspanify comes online, or you're praying that Sibby's able to match the output that Terrum's bring into their backline. Meanwhile, though, Sibby, take a peek at his build. Seems like dude got lost in the shop screen. That is a spike shield and a, don't have to know the second tier items too often by name. Is that a warded shield? Tier 2 on Chile and tier 2 void shield coming through for the Sun Wukong there. Feels like maybe had he finished out one of those items, he would have a little bit more survivability inside of these engagements, because you take a peek over at Terrum's build, and he is indeed finishing up his items, and it seems like it's been working out pretty well for him.
A great sort of example, though, of how there's a two-pronged problem for Clay Soldiers to deal with. There's too much damage from Angry, and there's also too much damage from everyone else. He does eventually decide the Unkile is the item he needs, as Trixtank just kind of taking autos from Caspanify for the fun of it, was buying time for Spudio to move into a better position. But Elysium have a lot of options about where to go now, Myth. Fury respawning and FG up. Maybe they don't want to go to FG just yet, so grouping on this left side around a Fury fight. And it looks like, yet again, Terram a bit ahead of where Sibby is on the map. They already have a great engage onto Agent. Darmok Pillars gets him low, but Trixtank falls as well in trade. But that Spirit of the Nine Winds already down. So 4-0-4, and Terram just walking forward. And look, Caspanify forced to airstrike out immediately.
Yeah, Terram was inside those tornadoes. You wouldn't believe it if you just looked at the HP bars. So
I
the
don't.
Gaia putting in the work for him. Look, Trixtank steps up so far, essentially alone there, that you gotta imagine that he realizes he's trading out his life regardless of whether or not they're able to pick up Agent. That's exactly how it pans out. Gets the Sunder, sets up for his team, and a couple of audio attacks from Spudio are able to finish off that kill pretty easily. Now, as you said, Finch, Elysium have free reign of the board. Could they go to the Gold Fury? Sure. Could they go for a tier 2 tower? I think so as well. I cannot fault them for almost any decision except for the decision to be passive, I suppose. They have got such a massive lead at this point that as long as they're doing something, it's right.
Right, you can be attacking or defending. Only problem would be doing that third in between, which is none. You don't really want the defending either. Just attack, guys, and that does seem to be the call as they start up the Fury. In comes Sibby, he must defend. In bird form, must come out as well. Beads and Blink both expended by him in the effort of making it in, and it did pay off. He got them off the Fury for now. Doesn't have a ton of ways back in. Still has the ultimate at his disposal, but that is about it. Meanwhile, doesn't look like Elysium are really in a rush to start this Fury. Trixtank has rejoined. Terram, as you said, again, doesn't really look like he was in much of a fight, but he was, and Gaia has him topped off already on the back of the knockup, procking. So there is the Darmok Pillars. Agent gets a good wall. He does make his way out of there, but Adapting and Terram are on the dive, and Ferrocryk looks like he had no support. There were people there, but what could they provide? Nothing except for a funeral march as he's sent to the grave. Meanwhile, Trixtank has Seraga locked down. Agent falls to Adapting, gets a double, and Spudio cleans up the kill with his front line there to provide support. But the stun from Terram is a death sentence. There's two doubles, one from Adapting, one from Spudio. That sets up 4, and the Clay Soldiers fold like a blanket among the pressure from Elysium.
Yeah, Sibby and Saragazek Voltron up together to try and attempt to match the damage output that Terram has in the backline. Weren't quite able to do it as two, and instead I think the HP bars tell a story that even I cannot unfold to the viewers at home. Almost full HP across the board for Elysium. The only one truly taking damage in that engagement was Trixtank, the support for the Order side team. Fire Giant now being looked at and picked up. Gotta stop saying looked at when Elysium's the one on it. Fire Giant on 5 members. Only 3 tier 2 towers stand between the Order side team and the exposed birds of the Clay Soldiers. But Clay Soldiers do have defense potential. The game does simplify once a team has Fire Giant, once they start knocking on the door of the Titan, and the Clay Soldiers draft is incredibly good at keeping minions and people outside of their Phoenixes. Ferrocryk on this Kukulkan going to be big and impactful. Should be able to drop those tornadoes not only as a displacement, a no-play zone if you would, but also going to be able to clear out waves from a distance. And if anyone steps too far forward, the CC core that Clay Soldiers has is incredibly strong. We've seen a couple of times in these engagements where Trickstank will step up and trade out his life in exchange for Agent. It's going to be a lot harder to do that if Agent's surrounded by 4 of his teammates inside of a Phoenix. Trickstank steps up and then gets CC'd out by Zek, or a knockup from Kasmanify, a stun from Civi, or even Agent himself. Should be able to at least clean up one of those kills and disjoint the engagement from Elysium.
They're going to need that to work. As Elysium are now on the warpath, 12k gold out in front, and Bede's going to be up for adapting and for Spudio in 40 seconds. Meanwhile, adapting seems to have Civi locked down over and right. That is the back canceled out for him, and now Civi on the run. Meanwhile, this push over in the left side Phoenix continues. Yeah, adapting's got Civi kind of locked down over there and right. I don't know. Clay Soldiers might be more happy with that trade than Elysium, really. As in goes the engage from Clay Soldiers, but Trickstank too good. Gets locked down inside the Dharmic Pillars and the Silence, and Spudio will claim the kill. Meanwhile, Sarikazek has been grabbed by Terrorum and killed by Terrorum. Yes, you don't have Civi, we don't have adapting, and Elysium win that trade. And they might even just win that actual battle on itself if left side Phoenix goes down, and adapting has Civi low over in right and not giving him a chance to back at all. Absolutely brutal that there is no front they're winning on. The White Fang of the top and bottom attack simultaneously has Clay Soldiers reeling.
It really does. Civi, you did a great job distracting adapting, I guess.
Yeah,
That's really all it was. Adapting wasn't required to be there. I spent a full minute breaking down the Clay Soldiers defense on Phoenix, and they did not use it, Finch. Not a single bit of it was used. Instead, engaged the fight on their own. You got to think that they are feeling confident because adapting's back, but 14,000 gold down, shouldn't be feeling confident almost ever.
Trickstank frozen out on right, but only Agent on him. It works perfectly. Mid Phoenix and left Phoenix both go down. Now that tier 2 in right exposed, and Elysium happily takes it. Adapting did give up the beads in his pursuit of Cibi. It would seem Trickstank had his beads forced out as well, but Angry, I don't know if my man's had to even think about which key he has his relics bound to. No one has gotten back to him because there's so many things before Angry even can become a thought on your mind, or they can even consider getting back there to him. What is Sergazek supposed to do? Walk back there? Maybe blink it on his best day, but it's just not happening, as Angry's been incredibly comfortable all game long.
Yeah, not sure Saragazek legitimately wins the 1v1 up against Angry at this point, by the way. Man does not have a single shred of magic, or dedicated, rather, magic defense. Normally we see an Anchile pick up, instead picks up the Winged Blade. Maybe concerned, as you said, Finch, with his ability to walk down the back line, but maybe in building up the journey, forgets the destination, walks up on him, possibly just going to die on his way there. I think that, if anything, Saragazek, his time is going to be best spent just trying to dissuade Terrorum, maybe utilize that first ability, as Cibi caught out a little bit here, should be able to disengage rather easily, but yeah, Angry's doing that to Cibi. I don't see how Saragazek steps up to him ever.
No, there's no hope. I think Angry going to spend the rest of this game as comfortable as he chooses to be. Tier 2 tower and right the target, adapting in position as Trickstank engages, and that gets Kaspanify low already, who does make his way out. The Tier 2 tower, a distant memory. And it looks like Elysium, no FG, no problem, as they want to brute force down this right side Phoenix, and brute force is indeed what this will be. It's what they used over in left. Finesse has been forgotten, Myth, as they continue to take what they want through sheer power.
Yeah, sometimes you're just faster and stronger than the opposition. This is one of those times. We don't need to master martial arts or the way of the blade. You're legitimately just built different at this point. I'm talking gold and experience deficit moving forward. But maybe Elysium, their days of training still staying with them, thinking to themselves, might as well cross the T's, dot the I's. But Agent blinking forward? Okay.
Yeah, whatever book Agent is, Angry had the read. Ultimate for CC immunity means Agent acquires nothing in that blink trade. Even the shell being forced to come out from Kaspanify, as it's Clay Soldiers, the one that were risky. And I think Elysium had their backs turned. They were going to walk away from this fight, but Clay Soldiers dragged them back in, and Kaspanify ends up falling for the pleasure. Terram gets the kill. Cibi going to fall to a misguided attempt to move in and keep the right side Phoenix up. Bears no fruit. The entire base open. And yeah, whatever thoughts they had towards Fire Giant, those are gone. Elysium will now just take the game end as the Titan completely vulnerable. Finally, adapting uses relics, but Angry never does, as game one goes to Elysium quite handily.
Yeah, 4 members of Elysium go undying in this one. Trix Tank, going to be the only one bearing that cross for his team, falls down 4 times, and every single time was at least able to get something in exchange for it, be it a kill or an objective or something along those lines to further progress his team towards that finish line. Elysium, so clinical here, man. That's the full statement. They just look good, and there's nothing else to say about it.
Yeah, that was a dominant game one there from Elysium from minute 1. I thought at the very least they might have a slower approach to the early game, but that wasn't even the case. They were ahead around the 7-minute mark by like 1.5k gold. Dominant performance of them. Clay Soldiers got to come up with a whole new strategy to try and defeat them. We'll take a quick break, then be back for game 2.
Well, it seemed like for a minute there the Clay Soldiers were going to hang
Almost
into this
literally.
game. And then Gore, there was, what, one single team fight that dragged on for a little while. Elysium were able to stay in it right on the left-hand side of the map there. And then this is an Elysium team that's not going to make any mistakes. They get that small lead. and this one just spirals out of control.
It is one of those fights that if things don't go as catastrophic, then Clay Soldiers are at least able to get another team fight in there. But
Right.
It was one of those really like just doom and gloom highlight areas that I had given at the very beginning, where it was like, man, if you either make it to 25 minutes, which technically it did, or if Elysium just get an insane lead early on, especially in terms of experience and gold, this is a kind of draft that will eat you alive. It is built for team fights. It is built for damage. And it really did take a little bit. I mean, it was pretty even up to a certain point. I think it was kills 2-2, a little bit of gold still in favor. I mean, right here, look, 2,000 gold,
Yeah,
that's
right
something
here.
that you can make up. But this was the fight that everything started to fall apart. And admittedly, you get a kill if you're Clay Soldiers, but Dave, we were talking about it behind the scenes, and that is that they got 4 kills total, 3 kills after this fight, 4 kills by the end of the game, and every single one of them were on the Trix tank. So he did arguably the exact job you want your support to do, right? Everybody else goes deathless. He had some insane setups, some great Ganesh silences, and it really did allow for him to kind of, unfortunately, maybe play the sacrificial lamb. He would die in order for his team to go further ahead. Terram would kind of take the herald, the torch, and be the front
Right.
line that was necessary for the rest of the fights. And then they just did so much damage. They had such a lead that it almost became hopeless for Clay Soldiers.
Right, Trix Tank did what he needed to do. He dashed in to close that gap, dropped his ult, and then he didn't have an escape because his dash was down. That happened a few of his deaths. There was one actually really nice bit of setup there in the mid lane. Agent provided a bit of a body block through Trix Tank's dash there and set up for a kill for Farrakrick out of the mid, but at 0-6, the assists are a little less attractive for Agent there than what Trix Tank was able to supply. Early on in the game, you saw some of the setup that the Clay Soldiers were looking for around Farrakrick. The Spirit of the Nine Winds were connecting for, again, a couple of kills onto just Trix Tank. But when everyone on Elysium is above 5 digits of damage, Trix Tank included, gonna be difficult to fight through that, especially when Civi and Saraga are beneath that mark. So now it's back to the drawing board, I think, here, Gore. I mean, Elysium, we thought this way in picks and pans, right? The first 3, that just screamed late game space control, run it down type team fight. So the Clay Soldiers, this is the type of game where you don't want to lose straight out of the gate in picks and pans. Maybe some adjustments there would give you a fighting chance here in game 2.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the big step forward for them. And a lot of it was, like, I mean, you look at that team fight, or at least the team composition that Elysium had, and some of those picks aren't supposed to start feeling really deadly. I mean, 14 minutes was when we saw that first big fight. But admittedly, you're looking at 18 to 20 minutes when they really start to hit their stride for things like the Baba Yaga, right? And so getting that lead that early on really helped them out. So I think slowing down the early game, maybe being more proactive in the early game. I think I joked to you and I said, I always laugh about late game team comps, and that applies a lot in SPL, but like in Europe, almost all you get is late game team fights. So you have to be a lot more precise, I think, if you're Clay Soldiers here with what timing you want to play at.
Right, it's not late game team fights, it's just team fights.
The team
it feels
fights.
like sometimes over here in EU. Picks and bans for game number 2 kickoff right now. And it's Clay Soldiers over here in the first pick spot. So, if you're Elysium, I mean, the real target ban there in game 1 was on that Giannis. I imagine that stays. Seems like a non-committal enough ban that you're able to keep enough on the table and feel okay taking that away from Farrakrick over on the other side. So I imagine Elysium will stick with something like that. Clay Soldiers, though, Gore, I think they banned out Scylla there in game 1. They don't want to deal with that one here in game 2 for Angry. And then the King Arthur for Terrorim there was terrifying enough that it's worthy of a ban here for game 2.
Look, there's a reason he is caught. Like, so on her, again, I'm going to talk about the Pro League stats because that's what I have the numbers for in my head. On her was like significantly ahead of everybody else in picks for a couple of weeks. King Arthur is literally 1 behind him now. Like, on her is it's still like a high priority. He's getting banned some in some of these games, but he's getting ignored. King Arthur is such an easy slot, and he's good at controlling things. And I think that when it came down to what we were seeing him go up against, he's just a lane bully, right? Like, when he goes up against Wukong, when he goes up against things like Tyr or any of the other warriors, he might lose, but he's also going to just then sit under his tower and be perfectly fine, wait for the team fight stage, and then be an absolute behemoth in your backline. I really like Clay Soldiers banning him out. I think he's going to be probably the biggest threat we see over the next couple of weeks. And so I think you take care of maybe one trouble and trade him for another, but I think On Her is at least more manageable than a King Arthur.
Right, and that does add a little intrigue over to the duo lane. We effectively saw nothing, as we'd expect, outside of that one team fight that happened on the left side of the map, but once the supports left that lane, the Hunters were fine there in game 1 just to sit back and farm. So maybe a little bit more intrigue now. Anher loves those 1v1 duels. We'll see if maybe Spudio is feeling confident enough to do that here in game number 2. Amir again. So this is an interesting lock-in, Goro. It was 0-6-3 for Agent there in game 1. Then the question arises, is it the comp that's around the Ymir? Is it the comp that Elysium had built? I guess all culminating in the question, do you like going back to the Ymir here for game 2?
I like Ymir 10 times out of 10. Like, I think he's just a good pick, and so it's absolutely worthwhile to pick him up and take it away from someone like Trixtank.
Okay, and right back into picks and bans for game number 2 we are. Appreciate the patience, everyone, as we get all that sorted out. And Gore, we're talking about the Ymir pick, how important that might be for the Clay Soldiers team here. Set, I think, also very important, because you're taking that away from adapting and providing a great team-fighting assassin-y type to your backline and frontline, I guess, depending on where the set wants to play.
I think this is, again, a really, really solid top 3 for Clay Soldiers. In fact, I'd argue this is stronger than what they had last time around. And you had asked about specifically going back to the Ymir, and I said that this is, in my mind, it kind of functions doubly as taking a pick away from Trixtank, as something that you know he's going to be potent with, and going back to it. And I will say I'm speaking from someone who plays as a support all the time, but when you go 0-6, it's not a full indication, like, especially in a competitive game, it's not always going to be whether or not, like, you had a great game. Sometimes you do have bad games, and you go 0-9, and you just feel awful about it afterward.
Right?
But then there are some games where it's just like, you know what? I went 0-6, but, like, I did that trying to get the setup. Like, if the team fight didn't go the way you wanted it to, you're not the guy getting the kills anyway. Like, your KDA is going to look like trash if you're a support. It's just the better your team is doing, the less trash it will look. And so I feel like the Ymir kind of, again, heralded that from some poor team fights, things not going their way. I think it's a good pick to go back to. I think their solo lane matchup is going to maybe be even more important, though, because trying to lock down what I assume as of right now is an Achilles, but what could end up being a flex pick because Achilles can go into the jungle, that's going to be something that they have to deal with here for Clay Soldiers.
And then you wonder, Gore, you look at Set Camazotz, the Morgan will be for Faircrick there out of the mid lane. So Giannis ban was in the second wave, but Clay Soldiers happy enough to let the mid lane pick fall to last year. Set or Camazotz, I guess, could be solo lane and jungle here for Clay Soldiers. There is some flexibility to be had there. And then Hunbats confirms that adapting will be on that pick out of the jungle, so Achilles versus one of set or Camazotz. Maybe set out of the jungle after what Adapting did there in game number 1. Tough to predict here, I think, in this one. But overall, we talked about Clay Soldiers ironing out that draft here for game 2. Do you think they've done so?
Yeah, I think from top to bottom it just feels better. Again, it's going to be a little more heavy execution base, and I think especially when you add things like the Morgan into the comp, there's a lot of wiggle room for things to get kind of weird and ridiculous in there. But I think with Hunbats on the other side, Xing Shin on the other side, there's a lot of good transformations for the Morgan to get into. Camazotz notably has a lot of sustain, so dealing with someone like Achilles, I would, again, put it as a lane that should theoretically stay as a stalemate. That execution might come into the equation a little more often. Set should have a pretty good jungle game. It's just keeping up pace with Elysium. Baba Yaga had a really solid game, but everybody else on Elysium, save for Baba Yaga, you can move their timers up 5+ minutes for when they're going to start feeling more effective. And that was 14 minutes in the last game, so that means that 9 minutes you better be ready to brawl.
And I think that this Hunbats is a great example of Adapting's flexibility. Game 1, you're playing the dive, assassin, melt down the back lines, undying there in game 1, and now you're flipping to a pick where Hunbats can do a good bit of damage score, but that Fear No Evil, huge setup for the rest of your team. It's that initiation style jungler instead of follow-up type jungler. So I think this is important for Adapting to show that he can truly do it all, as if we needed any more of an indicator of that. Game number 2, Elysium versus Clay Soldiers. In we go.
It's a good point. What does he have left to prove at this point? Not a whole lot. Thank you, Dolson and Gort on the desk. It's still Finch and Mifswag on the cast as we move into game number 2. Yeah, I'm going to keep that going, by the way, so don't even bother trying to slow it down. It is Bumba's this time, though, for Adapting. Still Eye of the Jungle for Saraga, but this time he is on the set. And you heard Gore say this time, Elysium, maybe you can move most of their timers up a little bit in terms of their relevancy, but they were already getting active at the 7-minute mark in game 1. I don't even know if there's room left anymore to move these timers up.
Well, if we can't move up Elysium's timers, and we gotta pray that they haven't, or Clay Soldiers rather, gotta pray that they haven't. I think that the Clay Soldiers themselves have moved up their timers. Sibi on Camazotz, Serga Zek inside of Set, Agent on this Ymir, and Kaspanify on Heimdall, all incredibly aggressive picks. I only left one out because I think it is the only one that runs counter to this draft identity. This Morrigan, I think, can get involved at level 5 and become that ult bot, likely going to be turning into this on her on cooldown. But outside of that transformation, Ferrokrick is the only one that cannot fight in the early game from this Clay Soldiers draft. So what does that mean for the Clay Soldiers? How do they win? What's the win condition here for them? It's early game aggression. I need to see them W-keying consistently and constantly throughout this game to try and pull a lead off of neutral objectives throughout the early before we get to that mid to late game phase of the match where Elysium is able to leverage phenomenal beads burning tools like Trixtank's ultimate or even Adapting's ultimate himself before they have the execute from Terrorim. But already feels like that time has passed as Terrorim and a terror on the map, as you said last time around, picks up first blood. Couldn't even drop it back to you, Finch. That's on me.
No, not at all. Some kills happened too quick, and that was one of them. Unlucky for Sibi, who has been a monster in his own right down here in the SCC, the SML, for years. But apparently running up against an even larger monster. The only thing a monster can fear is one with even less empathy, and apparently that's Terrorim, as he continues to be a nightmare on this map. I was going to ask you, though, and I think I still must go there. What are your target selections here for Ferrokrick in terms of his ultimate? I think I keep attributing this to Darda. I'm not 100% sure if it was him, but we've seen a lot of early game on her transformations from these Morgans in mid very recently. It gives them a ton of pressure. Is that what you want to see here, or maybe into more of a setup god?
I would like to see him transforming into the Anho, or even potentially the Achilles if they're worried about dive. It's between those two, but you cannot slight Desert Fury or Anher's pressure as he jumps in aggressive, but Double Freeze peels out Kaspanify.
Yeah, and the Bifrost's pretty good too, I've been thinking recently, and Adapting on his way to look for potentially a punish as Trixtank does find the slows. There's the leap into that knock up. Not going to find any more, though. They make it back to the tower, and good work on the wall. Not the knock up, excuse me, the Sacred Monkey toss comes through alongside the overhand smash. Agent Kaspanify, though, do a good job to respond to pressure. I think there were 2 times when you could have argued they were dead to rights there in the long lane, and they withstand the pressure.
They do, but I love this rotation timing from Adapting. I've been harping on the fact that we don't see junglers over inside the duo lane too often in Season 8 because of how large a trade-off it is if you don't get a kill, unless you do exactly what Adapting does there. Finds the pressure in lane, forces the Clay Soldiers to back up, and uses that time to invade a purple buff. Even though he doesn't pick up a kill, his time is not wasted. Intelligent positioning, but even then, we do see a slight level disparity start to grow. Zek spends the rest of the time farming up the map more naturally and gets about a 1-level lead for himself. This set already level 5.
And that is scary if you might be angry who had an excellent game 1, courtesy, I think, of his front line. Don't let the secret out, but every time your carries look good, it's because of the front line. Just gonna put that little secret note out there. It's true. And the jungler, who oftentimes is part of that front line, right? At least the front line dive, so to speak. It's really us little baby brain carries that get carried,
Smooth
so
brain.
to speak, from the back
No
line.
wrinkles.
Yeah, smooth and baby sized. I think that is correct. I don't know where I've gone off the rails here today, but it is now time for us to see, I was going to say what Fairquick can do, but it's Adapting who comes underneath the ward, and they're none the wiser. Fear no evil, maybe not optimally placed, but still going to end up doing the job as Spudio finds the second kill of the game, and they're going to get another, because Spainify, you cannot escape, and you are not safe. In comes Serica, but
Nice
he's
feel.
pushed off with a nice impale, and there is nothing, I mean nothing for him to find.
Hey, Zek jumps forward, drops the ultimate, and loses the will to fight, rightfully so. We'll see whether or not Fairquick's feeling confident enough. No jump available, picks up Adapting.
And then goes to the Fear No Evil, forces out the beach from Spudio and Saragek. Gonna respond with great aggression, a good turnaround from the Clay Soldiers off a monster rotation from Fairquick. I would never have advised it in 1,000,000 years, but a well played on the base Morgan form into the Unbots, and Elysium didn't know what hit him.
That is crazy. Adapting had a lot of time to find the jump there. Gotta think that maybe it's still on cooldown, especially considering Fairquick goes for the Dark Omen before going for the first ability. Think that maybe could have been a slight misplay, but Adapting falls down easily. The transformation into Hunbots to secure the next two as well. Fairquick doing it all for his team. It looked like, or at least felt like, all hope was starting to slip away from the Order's side, but now all of a sudden, they've got a lead for themselves.
I mean, we knew how important that first Morgan transformation would be. Who knew, though, that it would be turning into the Umbot that would be critical? As those are claimed by the Order side team on the back of a Shards of Ice from Agent committed to make sure the Greater Scorpion goes down. That was huge, man. Fairquick's going to have to find a lot more value like that, and that was the piece of this puzzle we thought might end up being a little bit slower with this start, but not at all as he rotates over to Duo and dodges out that Furious War, but has been caught. Beads are forced out. But in comes Adapting, whose job it is to get here when the beads are forced out. Tarum as well, and Fairquick as well. As you played earlier, there was nothing you could do there. That was 3 men committed. But maybe your team can win the fight on the back side of it. But Elysium held on to their ultimates. There's the Fatal Strike used for maneuverability. And still, Adapting does not have the critical Fear No Evil, which is needed. But it finally comes up off cooldown. Serica, though, keeps up the aggression, does find one with help from Sibi. But they lose the fight handily. A 3-for-1 in Sibi. If you're not careful, you'll make it 4. Comes back in, wants at least something in trade, finds the leap, and narrowly escapes.
Sibi playing with fire there, man, keeping me concerned. Even thinks about for a second going back in, but even at the end of the day, Elysium do come out ahead inside of that engagement, are able to close up that gold lead that had just established itself for Clay Soldiers as well. But this is the pace that we need to see from the Order side team. We said it about 5 minutes ago that they need to play this early game aggressively. They need to be looking to establish a lead before that 10-15 minute mark. And so far, it's not been for lack of trying. Clay Soldiers have been bringing the fight to Elysium every single step of the way. 10 kills in 7 minutes. This is not the European SCC of old.
No, and this is why I'm going to go to my grave, a Gore stand. He stuck to his call on the desk that this pace would pick up, and was exactly right, even though the pace was so fast at 7 minutes in Game 1, even faster here in Game number 2. As they come out of the gate hot on both teams. Clay Soldiers have been looking for that aggression. Love to see this team not backing down from a strong roster here in Elysium, and instead picking their moments and their spots well. Just did not quite pan out for them in that last team fight with Fairquick, who seems to be their critical piece, being removed from the board so early in that last team fight. Just wasn't much he could do when 3 members collapsed on him early. So we'll see what their next point of contention is. Where would you like to see it? I mean, is it just in this mid 3v3? Do they need Sibi to rotate out early, or do they need to head all the way over to Duo?
They should try and run it down onto the mid laner Angry or even potentially adapting. If either one of those two pieces falls, Clay Soldiers can group up and force an engagement on Pyro or Gold Fury, but they need to remove one of those two before they can feel confident looking for the fight. Neither team truly has a 50-50 secure here. The best secure on the map might actually be Agent with that Shards of Ice ultimate, and that's not exactly ideal up against this CC core of Elysium. So if you're going to take away at least one of those tools, that'll give them the confidence to keep moving forward.
The start from Angry. It's a Divine Ruin into cooldown boots. Worried about Serica and Sibi both, who can do a decent amount of sustain in the middle of these team fights, so that will help when that dive comes through. It's Spear of Deso and cooldown boots for Faircrook, who has said, I want Changeling up as often as humanly possible, and that is the path he's set up on. But I think that for Faircrook to make this build max value, he is going to need to be on cooldown using Changeling. Is that right? The right way to look at it, though, or is it just that when he uses it, it'll be back up as soon as possible if he needs it?
I think having it up pretty consistently is going to be key, but if anything, I want to see Faircrook move his build into one-shot territory. I'm talking find value in that base form. If this game is going to go long, and so far with the pace kind of slowing down here, seems like Clay Soldiers can't figure out where they want to route their aggression next, might as well start to look towards that Ratahuti, that Polynomicon, start foregoing a little bit of CDR in exchange for one-shot potential.
Spudio getting aggressive on the On-Her Desert Fury used, but
Nice.
Bifrost allows Caspanify to ride. He makes his way out of there, and Spudio unable to find anything more in that trade. In fact, Spudio has to give up his beads in response to the ultimate from Caspanify.
Yeah, Caspanify maintains his beads there. There was very low risk of him dying. He just drops beads to avoid the Fear No Evil if he has to, but teleports out just a couple of frames before adapting gets there. So phenomenal play from the Clay Soldiers, but now's the time to start leveraging that. We know Fear No Evil's down. We know Spudio doesn't have the Desert Fury, so the Order team really needs to start establishing this fight. Pull the Gold Fury and force Elysium to step forward.
What's their best team fight tool now? It's Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, not with 5 sets of beads up on the other side. And still Clay Soldiers not just hesitate, they full on retreat. Elysium had given up on the defense, and Clay Soldiers didn't seem to have the information. At the very least, they didn't seem to have the read. They were favored, so they back it up there. I know you wanted them to fight, but can you sign off on retreating there from Clay Soldiers and living to fight another day?
I can sign off insofar as you've extended the game state. You may have let a win con slip away there, but I don't think extending the game state is the plan for the Clay Soldiers.
Right.
Looking at these drafts, you gotta favor Elysium come late game. And adapting still doesn't have Fear No Evil, by the way, that huge AoE teamfight ultimate that has been winning engagements for Elysium. Yeah, that's still not available. You gotta think that the Clay Soldiers should be confident looking towards an objective, but it doesn't seem like it. Instead, I think this Order side team is waiting for a legitimate pick. They want to send someone to the Shadow Realm before they're confident enough to look at one of these PvE objectives.
And that's why this heavy CDR start for Faircrook had me a bit baffled. I mean, you always want Changeling up no matter what, so it's going to be big value, but I had the feeling they were going to be kind of using those a bit more freely, trying to see what they could find on the backs of some engagements from Faircrook alongside Agent, but that's not been the case either. It's been a little bit of a slower pace of these last couple of minutes. They started off hot with those first 7 minutes of basically non-stop action, but things have slowed down a bit since then. It has made this game look a bit slower in terms of pace from Elysium as Spudio moves in, can't find anything on the back of that pillar, but adapting is on his way. If this Clay Soldiers dual lane gets baited in any further, that's why Trixtank engages to try and start the fight, but Caspanify takes no chances. Desert Fury used to try and lock down Agent, but he had the beads. Adapting moves in, Fear No Evil, they're perfectly placed on the back of that Sacred Monkey engage. Adapting still seems to have it.
Oh, he sure does, man. The second those beads wear off on the side of Agent, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get in there with the Sacred Monkey. I'm going to make sure we get this kill. But what are Elysium going to do with it? They expend a lot of their tools there for just one pick onto a support. So I can sign off on Elysium not going for a neutral objective, especially considering we've already established they should have the advantage in the late game. Spudio, finally happy that the supports are no longer here, jumps forward and forces out a defensive ultimate.
No. But found the worst possible timing when Seragek was lying in wait. He hadn't really been present in duo lane all game long, only to lull Spudio into a false sense of security. And this must now be the Gold Fury pick they wanted, correct? As they do seem to be grouping around it. They do still have Farrakrick's ultimate, perhaps the keyest ultimate in the lobby. And Agent says no more waiting, no more stalling. He moves on to the Fury. Nearby is Tricksink, but what can he do alone? And he is alone for what it's worth. In comes Sibby for the zone. And this is why there was patience. The Clay Soldier wanted it to be 100.0% before they called it. There's the Fear No Evil coming out from Farrakrick this time, and Trickstank falls as well.
Whew, damage over the wall from Baba Yaga, though. Maybe Clay Soldiers should have been happy with what they got. They get the Gold Fury, but trade out Agent's life. And for what? Zibby steps forward, baited into a tier 2 tower. Gonna lose his life as well. Clay Soldiers, you were doing so well, man. What are you fighting over now? 2 dead, and for nothing.
But this is what I don't get. If they're waiting for the 100.0% chance, then what was that? Right on the back of what was a certain advantage for them. That must have been it, right? They weren't feeling themselves that first time near Gold Fury when they forced everything out of Elysium for free. But this time they were. They still get the Fury, still a good fight for the Clay Soldiers, still a lead. But just feels as though it's an inconsistent overall approach, at least from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, tonally inconsistent. Gonna have to talk with Hindu Man on the writing back there. He's phoning it in for the Clay Soldiers. Just being a little bit glib here. They are doing a good job controlling the pace of this game still. They are 2,000 gold in the lead, but just a small micro mistake like that are the openings that Elysium have exploited so well in the past. Teams have only made one mistake before and have lost to this Elysium roster. Luckily, the Clay Soldiers already secured the Gold Fury, already were able to win out on the engagement, so there's not much for Elysium to do on the tail end, except for strip away at tier 1.
Fear No Evil is the engage, and Agent will be the victim yet
again.
God. Caught out, and no need for an SVU, no need for an investigation. We know what happened. Fear No Evil continues to be critical on this map and setting up, and that time Agent forced into the afterlife, but Spudio needs to be careful yet again. The moment he thinks he has a 1v1 with Kaspainify, he does not, as Suragazek moves in and Kaspainify collects the kill. Spudio's got to stop looking for 1v1s over there because I don't think Kaspainify is going to give him one.
Yeah, because Fanify is conflict adverse unless he's jumping, and so far they've been jumping pretty consistently. Saragazek has a pretty quiet game 1, wasn't really able to get involved at the early as he did fall for first blood, but in game 2 is certainly making a better name for himself here. 3-1-2 is the set player, and all those kills have been inside the duo lane. I think he's found his home. Wouldn't be surprised if we see him try and reprise that role. Keep heading over to the duo. If Spudio's going to keep jumping in aggressive, I see no reason to stop.
No need. See if my man will keep taking these fights. If you can keep collecting those kills like a withdrawal at a bank. Nice call here on the Pyromancer from Clay Soldiers. No one from Elysium even on the same continent as this goes down with no contest whatsoever. Another good call for Clay Soldiers. They've got a significant gold lead here at this point, but Elysium still seem close in XP, actually ahead in mid, a bit behind in jungle and ADC. So some nice advantage for Clay Soldiers here at this point in the game, and how will they continue to force their lead, to force the hand of Elysium, who have the kill lead, despite being behind in every other metric. The only place I can go for now is FG, so no surprise this is a bit of a downtime for Clay Soldiers while they wait for some big objectives to come back up.
So we get to do a little build roundup. Stole your line there, Finch. Take a peek over at Adapting, who goes for a slightly less orthodox, or maybe completely orthodox if you think that Adapting's still in Season 6. Brawler's Beat Stick in that first slot, then immediately in the Jotun's Wrath. Normally we see the Bruiser item pickups, or even something like a Hydra's Lament. Instead, though, going down that Mace tree should help Adapting, just finding those ability cooldowns pretty consistently, as well as applying anti-heal very well with Fear No Evil, but is sacrificing both burst and survivability potential. Meanwhile, on the other side, Saragazek, a student of the meta, already has that shifters, goes for the stone cutting, and is likely going into the Brawler's Beat Stick next to deal with that HP 5 and lifesteal coming through from Elysium's draft.
It'll be nice for him, as it's Elysium choosing to at least position aggressively onto the order side jungle. Adapting, perhaps considering a gank with Sibby. They're going to need to be on point with the CC, or a bat out of hell will be a little too good. There's the engage. They get the ultimate out the way they want, and they don't hard commit. And Sibby forced to retreat Certainly could have fallen to Fatal Strike or Fear No Evil, but I think they knew that that ultimate was too well timed. It would not connect. So tier 1 tower in right goes down, and suddenly it's Elysium just grouping up and looking for places to kind of jump, huh? Anything they can find, they'll take. As now, looks like Trickstank blinking past the engage from Agent, who uses Shards of Ice to not get pipped up by the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel. So Trickstank's engage kind of on cooldown for now, and Agent's still sitting pretty.
Look, I gotta give shouts to Trickstank for just trying that. He played off the Morgan stealth sound, blinks past the Ymir freeze, and just says, alright, look, it's a big AoE CC ultimate. I'm probably gonna be able to grab the Morgan, or at least I'm gonna be able to hit the Ymir. So we get a support ult trade, but blink is expended by Trickstank. So Clay Soldiers have a small opening here. And I mean small. Trickstank, not the most important piece, not the most important engage tool for the Clay Soldiers to be looking towards, which is why we see them a little bit trepidatious towards this Primal Fury. Instead of grouping up and forcing the engagement, gonna play it slow and steady, which has been working for them so far. But slow and steady is only gonna extend the pace of this game, and I've been saying it for 18 minutes. I think that's exactly what Elysium wants.
Let's see if they can put it to test here. Fury low, but Bearcrick lying in wait for the engage. Can't find it. Clay Soldiers will confirm the objective, but Tarim seems like he's not a big fan of his odds. They back off, and Clay Soldiers do extend that lead out a bit more. Now around that 3,000 gold mark or so in their favor, but it doesn't seem like Elysium are hard pressed. I think you've got sort of a point about Elysium's overall long-term view. They're saying, listen, we'll give you these smaller wins if you can find them, but we are not going to hard commit and give anything away for free because they like their late game shot.
Yeah, what did we say back in Season 7? 20 minutes in, 3,000 gold down. That's the old sanguine lead, all right? That's where they thrive, okay? So now Fire Giant is becoming an option on the menu, and I think that I would not be awfully surprised if we see Elysium be the aggressors onto it already. There's a slight grouping on the right-hand side. Could be that just them getting ready for this Pyromancer, but the Clay Soldiers, I think, if they're able to win out on one more team fight cleanly, pick up one more objective, they will have established themselves a large enough lead to make up for the fact that this late game draft should favor Elysium. So keep your eyes on the Clay Soldiers. They're starting to realize it as well. We're starting to hit the end of our rope. We're all approaching level 20. It's not really about who's got the best early game anymore. It's which team can engage better. Clay Soldiers hit the gas, pull the fire.
But then they step back off. I don't even know if they realized how good a call that was. Elysium were not in position. And if this is a plan to all-in commit on a Trickstank, let's see if it works. He blinks past the stun again. He's nuts. I don't know how he's doing it. Fear No Evil locks down the fight, and Ferricrick deleted. Caspanify right behind him, and disaster strikes as we knew it would. Here for Clay Soldiers. Elysium were biding their time, and Clay Soldiers could not step on the gas fast enough. Agent, the next one on the menu, the next target up for selection if Elysium have their way. Great wall from Agent, but the slow from Adapted connects. The minions were there. And that means that Agent will end up falling 3 for 0 off a nutty engage from Trickstank and Adapting.
Yeah, I'm not speaking to the fans at home anymore. Yo, production, make sure we get that clip of Trickstank blinking past the Morgan stun, because that changes the face of this game wholeheartedly. Wins the team fight off of one relic usage. And now Elysium, we said it earlier this cast, one mistake is all it takes for them to completely change the face of this match. One miscommunicated engagement, one blink pass from Trickstank nets Fire Giant for 5 members. Still 4 towers standing for Clay Soldiers. That's 4 gold caches on the map to go get picked up.
Brutal. A brutal turn of events for Clay Soldiers, who were nursing a 2 to 3k gold lead for the last 10 minutes of this game. On the back of some nice early game plays. Looks like they at least want that tier 2 tower in left. They'll send Tarim in, but he can't defend up against 2, not with that much kill potential. So Tarim gives them their due respect. They will lose a tier 2 tower in trade, but the Clay Soldiers are going to have to really hold on if they don't want to lose a whole lot more. This lead's still not out of control. This is the kind of Fire Giant that Clay Soldiers can stand their ground on, but do they have to give up all their tier 2s here? I feel like they might have a chance on a tier 2 defense, at least on one.
Yeah, throw up a soft defense, because this is my concern with Morgan drafts from behind. You trade out an Orthodox Mage, means you have just about 0 AoE damage. You're going to have to struggle not only to deal dissuasion damage, like that AoE, like an Agni Rainfire, to keep people outside of your towers. You're also struggling to keep the minion waves outside of your towers as well. Clay Soldiers have dive potential, that's to be sure, so we might see them group up on a Phoenix, wait for Elysium to step up, and then immediately dive forward. Spearhead is the best defense for them. I'm just concerned with their ability to deal with this CC from Elysium in a simplified state. We've been talking about it the entire time. This late game team fight is just going to favor the Chaos team based on draft.
Mid-tier 1 traded by Clay Soldiers. Let's see if they can set up their defense in time.
Where they at?
Looks like the answer is no. Good wall, though, from Agent. Buys them that time. They could not get through positioning and timings, and now Elysium are forced to back up. But good damage out of the Phoenix, down well below half. But Clay Soldiers are here in earnest. Everything except the blink for Sibby available, because Spanify 10 seconds away from his Aegis as Elysium consider another push.
Elysium, all they have to do is slowly work their way in, utilize the healing from Fire Giant, and wait for that Changeling ultimate to get used out. Disengage afterward, and then read. Or just win.
Just a complete hard engage. Fear no evil plus the engage. But Faircrack has one of his own, and that keeps Elysium at bay. Tarum, the only one in the backline as Sibby looks for a dive of his own. Whirlwind of Rage and Steel deters the backup, and that means Tarum can move in. Saragazek the first one to fall, and they want Sibby right behind him. Overhand smack does it from Adaptic as they find the second. Make it 3 kills as Agent goes down as well. Who needs a soft engage when you can hard commit left side Phoenix down? And this game is D-O-N-E. Elysium able to find themselves a 2-0.
But maybe a hero play for Farrakrick at least pads the KD, not even. Adapting won't even allow him to have that one. Titan down to 50%. Farrakrick still healthy, might be able to move his way forward. Worried more so about the KD. Titan falls down. Elysium 2-0. Phenomenal play, man. And we saw it there at the very end, Finch. The engagement from Elysium looked like an all-in, but the second that Changeling ultimate came through, the second Farrakrick drops the Fear No Evil himself, the entirety of Elysium leaves the Phoenix range, waits it out for a couple of seconds, transforms back into the Morrigan, and then there's the hard engage. There's where they really went in and found the quadra kill. Phenomenal play, man. But we knew that. There's nothing I can say about it. Elysium's just that good.
Yeah, we knew they had a chance to win those late-game team fights. We didn't even super make it to the hyper late. That was 20 minutes when they flipped the script in an instant. Congrats to Elysium, another big win. Clay Soldiers have some work to do. We'll take a quick break, then be right back to go over Game 2.
Just seemed like it was going to be one of those days for this Elysium team. Game 1, I mean, it's quick, Gore. Game 2, somehow even faster, 23 minutes in. And look, if we haven't had this trend established already, now you get a great example of it. Is this is the type of team that'll kind of ease you into the game and then just steamroll you after the course of a couple of fights.
What I think is crazy is, in the very first one, you have a, 7 to 14 minute period before you really feel like Elysium is taking control. And in this one, it lasts even longer. I mean, you're getting a lot of fight back out of Clay Soldiers throughout the duration of this game. They actually looked really good. Like, there was a point, even going towards the late game, I mean, they had a 2,000 gold lead up on Elysium. And again, not something that you can count any team out of. 2,000 gold's pretty easy to make up for, but they had really good rotations. Specifically, like, Spudio was not allowed to flourish over here. Farrakrick had some really good transformations, specifically into the Hunbats to cause some trouble, and then it just all goes catastrophically wrong towards the end for them. But, I mean, this kind of early game, if they did that against, literally, I think any team that's not Elysium, they win that game.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tarum on the Achilles score was able to kind of bring things around there towards, I mean, it's not really late game, it's 23 minutes in, but adapting as well. We talked about how over the course of adapting his career, we've seen that he can play every single style of jungler, and Clay Soldiers learned that the hard way here in this set, the Assassin-y set in Game 1, and then the team fight-oriented Hunbats here in Game 2. Adapting can do it all, and at 5-2 and 9, the KDA would agree. Angry undying in the set, Tarum undying in the set as well after adapting in Spudio. Add a few deaths here in game number 2. So, Gore, great day for really Elysium from top to bottom.
Yeah, again, I think it's kind of the highlight. You had mentioned it coming into today. I think we've said it once every single week. It was the big talking point for this team when they were qualifying. Like, everything that you could have has been about the fact that, admittedly, adapting and Tricks Tank kind of steal the spotlight for this, but when you get to see this, especially where they are now versus how they were in maybe the first week or two, this is a team that is really firing on all cylinders, where all 5 of these members are just, they're dominating the competition. I mean, Spudio had, more damage, even though he was the one that anytime he tried to take a 1v1 in that game would find himself getting ganked. Like, I just think there's a lot of merit to what this team is bringing to it, and I'm really excited to continue to see them grow the way that they have, because they're looking really strong at this point.
That's right, they're on a warpath here, and it's going to be difficult to slow them down, I imagine, throughout the remainder of their games. It's all about, really for these guys, you have to imagine, I mean, mathematically, it's improbable, maybe at best, that they somehow fall out of those top 2 spots, but about ironing out some of those mistakes that I'm sure the players will feel like they had today, even in a couple of games that lasted as short as they did. 2-0 for Elysium over Clay Soldiers to start off this Thursday in the SCC. After this score, you and I are going to go cast Accounting Department versus Snake Hunters, and then on to Average Joes and Tiburones to finalize the day here. And then, of course, Pandemonium versus Just F6, the last EU game of the SCC. That'll take place later on this weekend before the SPL. And, I mean, if it's any surprise, the standing score after something like this probably don't shift all that much. Elysium was 5-1, if I remember correctly, or 4-1, rather, going into this matchup. Now 5-1. Clay Soldiers, this is the type of game where they start to fall behind, right? They're 2-4. Accounting Department versus Snake Hunters, one of those teams will jump up to 4 wins. So it's these games where those middle-of-the-pack teams are playing one another where you'll start to see some separation.
Yeah, I think Just F6 are getting to the standard where they really do have to just claw their way all the way forward. But for everybody else, like Clay Soldiers, it's not a big loss, but it is an unfortunate loss, right? Like Pandemonium, Snake Hunters, Accounting Department, every single one of those is still in the realm of being able to be supplanted by you, right? You're not really that far off because now you're technically 3rd, right? And then depending on how the next set goes, actually, no matter what, someone's going to lose and be at, 3-3, I believe? So that's going to be where, technically then you're 4th. But, like, you're not so far out of the running just yet. It's really the sandwich ends of this, the 2 bread slices that do make up Elysium and Just F6 that are the ones that are, I mean, if you're Elysium, you want to keep on doing what you're doing. Otherwise, it's a catastrophic fall to get out of the top 2. Same thing for Just F6. You have to have a monumental rise to get back up there.
Right. And look, if you're the Clay Soldiers, you just got to realize everyone has to play Elysium a couple of times, right? This was just your week to go up against this squad, and it does not look as good as you may have hoped that you would have up against that Elysium team. Elysium take the first set of the day 2-0. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Accounting Department versus Snake Hunters kicks off.